Invisible Children is a current movement that is helping child soldiers all throughout Africa, but mostly Uganda. They are out to create peace and to stop child soldiers and slaves in Africa. The child slaves do hard labor in poor conditions and hardly get anything in return, and it is still happening today. The organization calls for donation, and then those are used to buy supplies. Those supplies are made into products such as bracelets and clothing. There are 5 different kinds of bracelets that Invisible Children sells. Each one is made from a different color and has a different story behind it. With each bracelet, a story is included, and you can follow the updates of the stories on their website. All the money that is made from selling these bracelets to the United States goes to sending former child soldiers and slaves into school and giving them scholarships. Most organizations in Africa are made for schools. Schools for Schools is an organization that helps sending kids to school and remaking and rebuilding schools to make it a better environment and a better education for the children of Uganda and Northern Africa. As the organizations start later and later, they are getting more and more advanced, such as now there are more organizations starting that help kids get through school and go all the way to university. Another one of their campaigns is Try. Try is calling for at least 3,000 people that will donate $3 a week. All of the donations go to researching and rescuing Joseph Kony's child soldiers. Try made all the change in Uganda possible. They protested in front of Washington and slept on the sidewalks and ended up having the U.S. send money to Uganda to help reform. They were also a part of the peace talks. In these peace talks, the U.S. senior diplomat donated $17 million to Uganda. Try is not going to stop their cause until Joseph Kony is caught and all of his slaves are released and freed. This relates to the civil rights because the children were abducted and forced to work under his harsh conditions. But with groups such as Invisible Children, they now have hope to move on and get out of their situation. The Holocaust was a genocide that was the main part of World War II. The war involved 2 main sides, the Axis and the Allies. It was a genocide with the Germans, known as the Nazis, that wanted to exterminate all Jews and some other groups that they considered inferior to them. The leader of the Nazi Party was Hitler. He thought that the Jews and the other groups did not deserve to live. Jews were taken from their homes, their streets, and other private or public places. Once they were captured, they were soon sent to concentration camps. In the concentration camp, they were treated horribly. They hardly ever got a meal and didn't get much sleep or a reasonable place to live in. They were randomly beaten and often had to witness their friends and family being killed. Things that you should be able to express freely and have your own opinion on were taken away from the Jews, and they were forced to hard labor and more often unreasonable and random deaths just because they were Jewish. And when the Allies started surrounding the Axis, the Nazis wanted to start covering up the evidence of all the killings that had occurred. They tried doing this by burning the concentration camps and trying to obliterate all other evidence. When Allied forces surrounded the camp, the prisoners knew they were free, but still wondered how they survived such a massacre. When the Allied forces started to surround, Hitler knew he had no chance, so he committed suicide and no one found his body. On April 17, 1975, Khmer Rouges took over the Phnom Penh, Cambodia, and ended its 5-year civil war. The Khmer Rouges forces were a communist party. As soon as Cambodia was taken over, they tried to flee, but the Communist Party were patrolling the streets, which made it very difficult for them. The younger Khmer Rouges soldiers would carry the mortar shells on their back and wave flags proudly as they marched up and down the streets. They sat upon jeeps and waved their guns in the air, chanting and screaming, although the younger soldiers rode up on the tops of armored vehicles like tanks. They would form groups and raise guns as they drove to the Cambodian capital on motorcycles. None of the prisoners that were held hostages were let free. Many of them would be tortured for months until finally put to their deaths. The leader of the Communist Party was Pol Pot. In 4 years, over 1 million people were killed because of starvation, malnutrition, or disease. Another 200,000 were executed for being a prisoner of them. When they first took over, they quickly evacuated all cities and towns and made them start working as slaves. They had to work over 12 hours a day and were not fed well. Some died from being shot or being suffocated from a plastic bag over their heads in the killing fields, but most were killed by having a hammer or a shovel bashed into their head. People were able to find this out because after the invasion was over, they started to find all the killing fields and their bodies were starting to show up everywhere. The prisoners were usually killed at sunset. Only 7 prisoners that were at the camps were known to survive. The killings, torture, and invasions ended on the first early days of 1979.